Good morning, everyone. My name is Norm Horofker, and I'm the minister of this congregation, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Halifax. Coming to you live from 5500 Inglis Street. Welcome to another online Sunday service. I hope you got to enjoy the wonderful weather yesterday. I was here with a number of other people. We had 37 guests for our bonfire, sausage, and marshmallow roast on the front steps of the church yesterday. We got lots of friendly waves and horns honked as people were driving by, taking in the spectacle. It was a nice day. You're all invited every Saturday morning to come out and widen the circle. Tomorrow, you may have heard, is Valentine's Day, a day dedicated to love. In the service today, we'll be talking about empathy and compassion, and I'd like you to consider that love, empathy, and compassion are all more than spontaneous emotions. More importantly, they're the results of work, an act of will. You can ask any couple that has sustained love over decades. So happy Valentine's Day to you all. Jessica Friesen is our music director. Marie-Claude Leroux is our director of religious exploration. And this morning, John Piccolo is our volunteer technical director. It's a great team, and I thank you all. If you're not already receiving notifications from our church and you'd like to receive updates on our activities and services, please send an email to minister@uuch.ca. Jessica has chosen a prelude piece for us this morning that will help you to relax and prepare for our time together. Jessica.
It's not supposed to be a sad song, it's supposed to be a reflective song. So I will be playing a Venetian boat song by Felix Mendelssohn.
Before the service begins, I have a few announcements. The order of service for today was sent out over UU Info on Saturday evening, and I encourage you to see the order of service for a complete list of announcements. But here are a few highlights. Highlight for me, certainly, as your minister, I'll be taking a month's leave of absence beginning, actually I'm leaving town the middle of this week, but I'll be doing the service next Sunday, or at least the reflective part of the service, from Milwaukee. where Janet and I will be with our daughter, for the birth of her second child and our third grandchild. I hope to be back March 27th, when we'll be having a special service with the church in Bangor, Maine, a repeat of what we did last year, celebrating the running of maple sap and the spring. With the opening up of some public health restrictions, effective tomorrow, the UUCH board will be meeting on Wednesday, and we anticipate there will be some easing of restrictions for the service by next Sunday. However, we'll continue to have services on Zoom and on YouTube, so it'll be a hybrid event. Team meeting is coming up this week. The caring team meets the third Tuesday of the month. They'll be meeting February the 15th at 7 p.m. Team lead is Sylvia Mattinson. There's a board meeting. They normally meet the first Monday of each month, but this month the meeting will be held on Wednesday, February the 16th at 6:30 p.m. Of course, Troy Saunier is our board president. Saturday brunch team meets the third Friday of each month. It'll be February the 18th at 1 p.m. in person at the church. With my absence for 5 Saturdays, the team would welcome some extra help on Saturday. And if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to our team lead, Kath Anthony. So I've announced my impending retirement at the end of June this year, and we've started a process to transition to hopefully a new minister. There will be a congregational meeting on this ministerial transition following the regular church service on Sunday, February 27th via Zoom. And after church climate discussion, there will be another discussion after the church next Sunday on February the 20th. The topic will be the support of Halifax, acting on climate together. Please join us, especially if you live in HRM. Now, before we begin the service, we pause to acknowledge our responsibility to the original peoples of this land, to the treaties that we signed with them, and to the land that they have cared for. This morning, Scott Wood will lead us. Scott?
Thank you, Norm, and good morning, everyone. As we gather for this Sunday service in our church sanctuary and virtually on Zoom and YouTube, we acknowledge that we are meeting on the unceded ancestral lands of Mi'kmaq, the home of the Mi'kmaq people. Our UUCH Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation work seeks to better understand the history of relations between our First Nations people and European settlers, and to explore new ways to live in right relationship with one another. To achieve this, we must develop relationships with them and learn how they wish us to support their quest for justice and dignity. Canada is not alone among nations in this quest. I have especially observed that 2 northern countries, Greenland, which is an integral part of Denmark, and Norway, also have engaged in processes of truth, healing, and reconciliation with their Indigenous peoples. In fact, we often study each other's approaches for ideas and inspiration. When Canada created the Indigenous territory of Nunavut, a new model of governance was adopted that was more aligned with an Indigenous way of making decisions. It was one without political parties and based on consensus model of decision making. In some ways, it mirrors the home rule model of Greenland, with its status as an independent nation within Denmark, except with respect to foreign relations and defense. The Indigenous Greenlandic people are closely related to our Inuit people and speak virtually the same language. In Norway, the Sami people, or Laplanders, are concentrated mostly in the northern Arctic province of Finnmark, and in interface with the Norwegian governance institutions through a Sami parliament. In all 3 countries, there is a recognition of the need to preserve and revitalize Indigenous culture. One essential tool for this purpose is to broaden the use of Indigenous language through supporting community radio and TV. In both Greenland and Norway, a national public broadcaster provides Greenlandic and Sami programming to 100% of the Indigenous communities. CBC Northern Service broadcasts in many Indigenous languages, while the Canadian Radio and Television Commission, our broadcast regulator, has a special Indigenous category of community radio licensing tailored to their special needs, especially their as small isolated communities. These stations encourage the use of Indigenous language. There are 3 of the First Nations in Nova Scotia, 2 in Cape Breton and 1 in Hants County, with a community radio station that offers some Mi'kmaq language programming. Both Greenland and Norway actively promote and subsidize the publications of books in the Indigenous languages, as well as language instruction in public schools and post-secondary institutions. Across Canada, there are an increasing number of colleges and universities with Indigenous studies programs. Cape Breton University recently opened a Mi'kmaq language program. These are all important steps forward, but much remains to be done. And we need to seek guidance from First Nations communities about how we, the settlers, can best help. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And now, as we cross the threshold together, entering this shared time of community, we begin as UUs do around the world by lighting our chalice. I'll light the chalice following words that I'll read adapted from the writings of Reverend Erica Hewitt. But first, we have something special. We struggle to draw the circle wide in a time of pandemic. And one of the inclusive parts of our service that I know you all miss the most is the participation of our children. So I'm pleased to share with you now Abigail Saunier reading a short poem. The volume, I'll tell you in advance, is low, so turn up your volume, or better yet, listen very carefully.
Listen by Charles Waters and Ivan Lapham. Foggy thoughts open up to the clear sky as my friend leans forward, gently large eyes zeroed straight on me, listening.
Thank you, Abby. Her reading tells us that the best way to welcome someone into our circle, open your heart and listen to them. Listen carefully. This reading from Erica Hewitt. The chalice, as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, arose as a sign of promise that the marginalized would never be forgotten or ignored. This morning we remember all the people who have been told explicitly or implicitly that they're anything less than whole, that they somehow stood outside the circle. As we light our chalice, may we commit to make of our lives a beacon, a symbol of our promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all means all. And now Jessica will lead us in our opening hymn, a beautiful challenge to us all to expand our empathy.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me, comfort me tenderly? Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
When we fail to pay attention to what's going on around us, when we draw our circles so small that we're not listening. When that happens, we allow problems outside our circle to grow, and we're courting disaster. Marie-Claude, our Director of Religious Exploration, has a story and a warning for us. Marie-Claude.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to share with you a story that's been adapted from a Burmese folktale. It starts with a king and his minister spending an afternoon together discussing the kingdom's affairs. Taking a pause, they sat out on the balcony overlooking the great, beautiful city that they ruled, and they were eating crackers dipped in honey. As the king picked up a cracker, a drop of that honey fell to the pavement below. "Your Majesty," said the minister, "let me go down and have that honey cleaned up." "No, no, no," said the king. "It's just a drop of honey. It's none of our concern." After a little while, some flies were attracted to the honey, and they began to buzz about. "Your Majesty," said the minister, "flies are being attracted to the honey. Let me go and have that cleaned up." "No, no, no," repeated the king. "It's just a drop of honey. It's none of our concern." After a little while, a cat came along and began to bat at the flies and lick at the honey. "Your Majesty, it's beginning to attract animals," said the minister. "Perhaps I should go and have it cleaned up." "No, no, no. It's just a drop of honey. It truly is none of our concern." After a while, along came a dog who noticed that the cat was batting around at the flies and began to snap and bark at the cat, who began to hiss and meow back at the dog. The two animals began to fight. "Your Majesty," said the minister, "the animals are fighting in the streets. We must do something." "No, no, no, no. It was just a drop of honey. This has nothing to do with us. It's none of our concern." The owner of the dog and the owner of the cat noticed what was going on, and they began to shout at each other, and they came to blows. "Your Majesty," said the minister, "there are people fighting in the streets. We must go and stop this." "No, no, no, no," said the king. "This is their issue. It's none of our concern." The two people fighting became many more people fighting as others joined in the fray. And the king looked down, and suddenly the whole street below had erupted into what looked like a giant street fight. And someone picked up a torch from the wall and hurled it through a window. Fire raged, and eventually it spread to the palace. The next thing they knew, the king and his minister were being escorted down a ladder from the balcony into the street because the palace itself was in flames. Later that day, when the fire had died out, the king and his minister surveyed the ruins of their land. Suddenly, the king stopped in the street underneath where his balcony had been. He reached down and touched something in a small puddle on the ground. "It's honey," he said, remembering. "I guess I should have cleaned up that drop of honey in the first place. Now my whole kingdom has been lost because of it. Perhaps that drop of honey really was our concern." This story has me wondering, when we widen our circle of concern, what problems might be averted?
Thank you. And now, Jessica will assist as we take this special time to reflect on our joys and sorrows. It's a sacred time in the service, the time that we set apart to honor the many joys and the many sorrows that you, the members and friends of this congregation, are living, and to acknowledge the mutual support of our community. As is our practice, Jessica will light one candle for all those who are here with us or in our thoughts, who are struggling mentally, physically, financially, or emotionally. And we'll also light one candle for all the joys that are with us. The big joys that come along only infrequently, and the little joys that we're blessed with every day, if we're but able to see them. Each week, I invite anyone who would like a candle lit to email me with details. And later in the service, when we stop live streaming on YouTube and before the coffee hour begins, I'll invite anyone else to share a joy or a sorrow and have a candle lit if they would like to do so. This morning, the first candle is in memory of Irisha Cox. Irisha died on February the 9th with her two sons by her side. As we consider our theme, Widening the Circle, I'm reminded once again how small our circles are and how little we know of one another. Many of us only got to know Irisha late in her life, and maybe you didn't know that she went back to school at age 73 in 2015. This from a newspaper article at the time. 73-year-old found herself on her own after her husband, Noel Knockwood, a Mi'kmaq spiritual elder, died last year. She wanted a job, but despite half a century of work experience, she needed to show the qualifications. Irisha said, "I liked the students that I worked with. I loved the communications course, but I found it difficult," she says. "I wanted to communicate with them, but they were too busy with their cell phones, too busy texting, too busy on the internet." Her instructor says, "Cox did leave quite an impression. She has contributed to everyone, her life, her knowledge, her experience, her wisdom. And also just encouraging people to accept who they are, along with any mistakes they may have made, to embrace it all as part of who you are," said the instructor, Catherine McKinnon. Cox finished with an 83% average. She also received the Dean's Award for overcoming challenges and inspiring staff and students, something that she's still getting used to, or was getting used to at the time. Marie Walton asked that we light a candle this morning for her niece, who is suffering from the loss of her son, Timothy, in a freak apartment fire. Marie writes that thankfully they're being supported by a large extended family in the Vancouver area. And another candle for Vanessa Lindsay Botten, a member of this congregation, a great choir leader, vocal coach, and musician. Vanessa suffered a concussion several months ago and is still unable to return to the work that she loves. And another candle this morning, some of you may know Carolyn Balderson-Perry. Carolyn was the Director of Religious Exploration in Ottawa and in Montreal for many years, and she died with family and music around her. Later, when we stop the live streaming on YouTube and before the coffee hour begins, I'll invite anyone else to share a joy or a sorrow and have a candle lit if they would like to do so. And now, Jessica will lead us in our reflective hymn, number 1002, Comfort Me.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me. Sing with me. Sing with me. Sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me. Sing with me. Sing with me, oh my soul. Let's do Comfort Me one more time. Think about the words. Comfort me. Comfort me. Comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me. Comfort me. Comfort me, oh my soul. Thank you.
May the joys and the sorrows, both those acknowledged here this morning and those held in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, weave us together in the interdependent fabric that is our community. Scott Wood has a short reading for us now to set the tone for my reflection to follow. Over to you, Scott.
This is from Leslie Jameson's book, Empathy Exams. Empathy isn't just something that happens to us, a meteor shower of synapses firing across the brain. It's also a choice we make to pay attention, to extend ourselves. It's made of exertion, that dowdier cousin of impulse. Sometimes we care for another because we know we should or because it's asked for, but that doesn't make our caring hollow. The act of choosing simply means we've committed ourselves to a set of behaviors greater than the sum of our individual inclinations. This confession of effort chafes against the notion that sympathy should always arise unbidden, that genuine means the same thing as unwilled, that intentionality is the enemy of love. But I believe in intention, and I believe in work. I believe in waking up in the middle of the night and packing our bags and leaving our worst selves for our better ones.
Widening the circle, whose job is it? The theme for February is widening the circle. And I hope that you may already be predisposed to think that widening the circle is a good idea. As the author Joanna Macy has said, it's no longer appropriate to think only in terms of my nation or my country, let alone my village, or I might add here, my friends in the congregation. If we're to overcome the problems we face, she writes, we need what I have called a sense of universal responsibility, rooted in love and kindness, compassion, and empathy. Narrow-mindedness and self-centered thinking may have served us well in the past, but today will only lead to disaster. Here ends the quote. The reading that Scott just shared with us tells us that widening the circle is the inevitable result if we strive to develop empathy for one another, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. And that empathy is not just the result of an instinctive reaction. Empathy is a trait that we can work on at developing in ourselves. We can do so, and the results are no less sincere. Empathy is, in fact, an expression of will. I chose that reading after I'd selected the topic for my reflection, widening the circle, whose job is it? After that was published for the newsletter, I felt uneasy with the title. That word job was problematic. It makes widening the circle into a job, something that requires effort, and work, and discomfort. But on further reflection, I think that for many of us, in many circumstances, that is exactly the case. We have to be prepared to try to see the world through another person's eyes, and that is hard work. Hard because we may have to give up some strongly held personal beliefs, or at least suspend them while we're in discussion. Beliefs about the way the world works, what is right and what is wrong. The theme, Widening the Circle, entered UU circles as the title of a report from the Commission on Institutional Change of the Unitarian Universalist Association. That's the American equivalent of the Canadian Unitarian Council. The Commission was established in 2017 when the UUA was confronted with the evidence that the organization exhibited systematic racism and a dominant white culture that worked to exclude people of color. The Canadian context and the context of this congregation is different than the situation faced by the UUA, but we certainly have our own issues related to widening our circle of concern. The problems are institutional and the problems are personal. It's one of my concerns that the idea of widening the circle is not part of the formal mission statement of this congregation. And this morning, Colin reminded me that dropping the word church from our name is an important way to widen the circle. And that's a change that the congregation will be considering in the months ahead. The word church can stand as a barrier, a tripping point, a difficulty for some people when you invite them to church. They know what church is, and they may not want any part of that kind of church. One of the ways we tighten the circles around ourselves and our communities is to deny and ignore the discontent and the perspectives of people that we disagree with. When we strive to create a community of people who think like we do, we're seeking a comfortable place where we won't be challenged. And there's a place for such relationships, but it's not the place of a Universalist Unitarian congregation. Here we should be challenged. It's the work of finding connection and compassion and empathy that is the important work of our faith, the work that the world needs. The widening of the circle that I'm talking about is not about adding more people like us to the congregation. It's about adding more people who are not like us. It's the building of bridges, the valuing of difference, the celebration of our diversity. That's our work as Unitarian Universalists. Marie-Claude's story this morning speaks of the consequences of ignoring the world outside your circle. We're all aware that our society is becoming more and more polarized, with individuals bound in groups by circles that offer very little overlap. This is the consequence of ignoring that metaphorical drop of honey that Marie-Claude was telling us about. By discounting the problem that others raise, by ignoring, or worse yet, demeaning the opinions of those who would disagree with us, we set the stage for the escalation of polarization and eventual violence. Like the drop of honey, there's an opportunity to avoid the polarization if we enter into mutual respect and dialogue early, before sides are dug in and positions are hardened. We can, in the words of John Mayer, ignore those who we disagree with, even demean their positions, and wait for the world to change. Or we can proactively engage with those we disagree with and be agents of change in the world. But it's not easy work. The challenge we face in widening the circle reminds me of a famous quote. "We choose to go to the moon." That speech by President John F. Kennedy. He said, "We choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Because the goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and our skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one that we are unwilling to postpone." In preparing for the service today, and particularly the order of service, and the slides that accompany the theme for the month of February, I'm indebted to Marie-Claude for drawing the Zen exercise of Enso to my attention. Enso is the meditative Zen practice of making a hand-drawn circle with traditional Japanese ink and brush in a single fluid brushstroke. Let's have a look at that slide again. I bring you a quote from a book, Agnostic, A Spirited Manifesto by Leslie Halton. A classic Zen exercise is the Enso, the circle hand-drawn in a single fluid brushstroke. It's close to perfect, but it's never there. If perfection is what you want, you can produce it anytime by using a compass or a computer. But the Enso defies such mechanistic precision. Indeed, it is often incomplete, left slightly open, as though an invitation to everyone and everything beyond it. And each one is different, never the same circle twice. You can see the hairs of the brush and the drag of the ink on the paper. Trace the fluidity of the moment when the stillness of meditation was released in one rapid stroke. Sense the calm grace of the artist. The beauty of the Zen circle lies precisely, or more precisely, imprecisely, in its imperfection. That is what speaks to us. That is what draws us in. A perfect circle is uninteresting, a closed system containing nothing. While an imperfect one vibrates with warmth, it invites us into the moment of its creation, into that single deep exhalation as the hand arced through the air, the brush over the paper. It is open, human, fallible, an expression that is of soul. Here ends the quote. I love that image of an imperfect circle, open as an invitation to everything beyond it. Vibrating with warmth, that's the circle we seek to expand, not the perfect closed circle drawn with hard lines and mechanical certainty. And our circle here, this congregation of 90 or so adults, exists in a vibrant community of close to 400,000 people. I think we have room to expand our circle. Our congregation is, I like to think, a budding Enso-like circle. The work of our refugee support team is a shining example of widening the circle. Our Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation team, with a focus on relationship, is another example, as is our Saturday brunch, a brunch that invites neighbors with a variety of lived experiences into our space. And we have tools now to widen the circle that didn't exist just 2 years ago. I'm speaking, of course, of our online services that allow us to expand our circle around the world if we choose. The work of widening the circle is by definition never complete until the day we realize the ideal of one planet and one people. A diverse and varied planet, to be sure, but a planet where we are all in respectful dialogue. Whose work is this? I'm here today to tell you that it is your work as Unitarian Universalists. And again, we shouldn't be afraid of the work. If it makes us uncomfortable, that's a good thing. That's a sign of spiritual growth. Our faith tradition, with its commitment to individual freedom of belief that is inherent in Unitarian and Universalist heritages, calls on each one of us to welcome the stranger, to do the individual work of expanding our capacity for empathy, to grow the circumference of our imperfect, vibrating, warm, and welcoming open faith. May it be so. Amen. And now Jessica has selected a very appropriate interlude for us. John Mayer's Waiting for the World to Change. I think Mr. Mayer was telling us that waiting for the world to change is what many of us are doing. And maybe that's a cop-out. Jessica.
This is one of my favorite songs. I hope you enjoy it. Me and all my friends, we're all misunderstood. They say we stand for nothing, and there's no way we ever could. Now we see everything that's going on with the world and those who lead it. We just feel like we don't have the means to rise above and beat it. So we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting on the world to change. It's hard to beat the system when you're standing at a distance. So we keep waiting, waiting on the world to change. Now if we had the power to bring our neighbors home from war, they would have never missed a Christmas, no more ribbons on their door. And when you trust the television, what you get is what you got. 'Cause when they own the information, oh, they can bend it all they want. That's why we're waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. It's not that we don't care, we just know that the fight ain't fair. So we keep waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. We're still waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. One day our generation is gonna rule the population. We keep waiting, waiting, waiting on the world to change. We keep on waiting, waiting, oh, on the world to change.
And now a word for our sponsors. That would be you, those tuning in by YouTube or Zoom to this service this morning. Here's your reminder. Don't wait for the world to change. The ongoing functions of our congregation require your financial support. The best way to do that is through support of our annual pledge drive, and this year the congregation has been very generous. We appreciate your support. If, however, you weren't able to participate in that way, or if you would like to support other activities that are funded outside of the pledge drive, here's your chance. Two programs that need funding are the Saturday Brunch and the Minister's Discretionary Fund. During the COVID, as winter is closed in, I've been pleased to be able to occasionally help members, friends, and neighbors with small amounts of money that have made a big difference. These funds come from your donations to the Minister's Discretionary Fund. If you'd like to support our work, this slide will tell you how. For our closing hymn, Jessica has selected one that asks us as Unitarian Universalists to widen our circle, our personal circles. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See one another clearly? Do we know who we are? Jessica.
So I want you dancing at home. The words are by Harry Belafonte.
Oh.
And I know. So I didn't realize that because I love playing this song. So dance at home, sing at home, and I'll pretend that I see you. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Whoa, so is the life of Batiwa. So is life. Whoa, so is life. Oh, so is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Whoa, so is life a Batiwa. So is life. Whoa, so is life a Batiwa. So is life. Water makes the river, river wash the mountain. Fire makes the sunlight turn the world around. We are of the Spirit, truly of the Spirit. Only can the Spirit turn the world around. Oh, so is life a Batiwa. So is life's. Whoa, so is life a Batiwa. So is life. Again, ready? Whoa, so is life a Batiwa. So is life. Whoa, so is life a Batiwa. Ha, so is life.
Thank you. Love that piece. And now, before we end the service with the ritual of extinguishing the chalice, these words by Reverend Rod Richards. You won't be alone. We'll be side by side with one another, with people yet to come, with partners we have yet to meet, creating ever-widening, imperfect, perfectly imperfect, precisely imprecise, circles and ovals and oblongs and things of beauty, as we practice sacred flexibility, welcoming love and healing pain, and demanding justice and saving lives. Go forth now and make some new shapes. Thank you all who attended the service today. I'll say goodbye to those who joined by YouTube now as we end our live streaming. For those who joined by Zoom in a few minutes, we'll return to sharing joys and sorrows, followed by our virtual coffee hour. Thank you again. The streaming service will now end.